Excuse my surroundings. It's been hectic trying to get this all organized in. Everything went wrong. Of course, it always goes wrong using new technology, but I think I got it all to work. So I'm going to wait to see if people are going to be tuning in. And I know there's a bit of a delay. So if you are seeing this, just send me a message. Oh, it does say there are 3 people watching. So we're good. If you aren't logged in onto YouTube, you can't send messages. So you can always go into the next video if you want to send messages in case you don't have an account today. But we will get started. I hope everyone's doing well on this Friday evening. Today we are going to make, today we're going to talk about making the Remy Raglan. This is my packaging that I traced and now is not going to ever fit back into normal settings. So to begin, I do have sort of some talking points that I want to run through, but if you ever have any questions, just feel free to put it in the chat. And if you're watching this not live, just feel free to put a comment and we will respond to you that way. So this pattern, when I made, in terms of fabric choices, that's what we're going to talk about first. So when I made the sample for the shop, which is also the thumbnail for this video, and you can go see it in the shop anytime, and I will bring it for the video next week. I made that sample out of a viscose twill. The pattern designer calls for a linen or a linen blend, very lightweight, in order to show off the linen. But any lightweight linen will work, and even some heavier weights. Sorry, any lightweight woven will work, and even some heavier weight wovens. We had one customer come into the shop yesterday who had made a Remy Raglan with, oh, hi, Selena. Sorry, again, there's a bit of a delay, so there might be some time in between me saying anything and your messages there. But yes, they made their Remy Raglan out of the waffle cotton we have in the shop, and she loved it. So I think sort of the sky's the limit as long as it's a woven, and as if it's a woven and it's a heavier weight, it will maybe fall more boxy. If it's lighter weight, it would have more drape. If it's more like a viscose or rayon, it'll have a lot more drape. So just keep those things in mind. Another thing that you can use for this is your scraps. If you have any small pieces, especially the version, let me see here, especially this version 2 would lend itself quite well to scraps because you could color block it, one on this side and one on the other side. And then on the back part of it, you can choose also to continue color blocking. So that could be fun and a way to use up your scraps. And another key point, I mean, I always learn something when I sew because I should always read the directions slightly more. So I'm here to teach you my mistakes. The version that I made for the shop, the sample, the fabric does not look good on the wrong side. And what that means is, just to give you an example, on this side, it's exactly what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to look very beautiful, but on the wrong side, it's not aesthetically pleasing. And that's how I did mine at the shop. So what that means is on the cuffs, because it's meant to be cuffed up like this, you're going to, as an example, you see my seams here, you would see the wrong side of the fabric here. So it's not going to look good. So what I did is I just kept it with its length. I didn't cuff it up because there's some instructions that we'll get to in the later weeks when we get to the sleeves, where you can do some hand sewing and keep it permanently cuffed up, or you can just cuff it up when you want it. As a result of that, like I said, I just left it long. If you choose a fabric or you have already chosen a fabric that is wrong side, not very pretty, you can choose to do what I did. You can choose to do a hack of the cuff. So an example would be the cello shirt. If you've ever made the cello shirt or dress, the way they do their cuffs, you would just, instead of attaching your cuff in one direction, and I'll talk about this when we get to that stage, but you would just have to hack it. And the last option would be to do the gathered sleeve free expansion that Sew House 7 has available on their website. So all of that would help in terms of if you have already made your fabric choice and decision, or you just really love your fabric, like the one I did for the shop. That fabric is gorgeous, really shows it off very nicely, and I just went with it. You don't always have to follow what the pattern designer says, so you can just do it that way. Oh, and my last point is if you're unsure about the fit, we're going to talk about fitting, but if you're unsure about fit and you're just not, and this has happened a couple of times with people coming into the shop about this tutorial, they have this beautiful linen that they've had in their stash for years, but they're unsure about cutting into this beautiful linen first to finish it because they don't know how it will look on them and how they want it to drape. So what they did is they purchased some more inexpensive fabric. So in both of those cases, they had purchased crumple cotton, which is at our shop. It's $13.99. It would be a great wearable muslin, and then you could tweak it in that scenario to make your second one with your gorgeous linen at home. So whichever option you're thinking of, either works. You can make a wearable muslin with your regular, beautiful, gorgeous linen, or if you want to take a little bit of a chance. And so if you don't want to take a little bit of a chance, then you should make a wearable muslin. So, and I might talk fast. I apologize, but feel free to write any comments if you guys have, any questions if you guys have anything. But this session, in case you're tuning in a little bit later, I see a couple people extra have joined us. This session's just going to be me talking and answering any questions if there's any. And you're always welcome to come into the shop. Anyone at the shop would be able to help you with fabric choices and the like. So moving on, we're discussing notions and supplies. So just to begin, there are two versions of this top, which we are going to discuss in a little bit, their key differences. And as a result, you need different notions for the two. So for both, you will need marking tools. So that could be a pen, chalk, anything that's going to go on the fabric. It's better to have something that would wash or come off. So you don't want anything permanent. But when you're tracing out your pattern, definitely have something that's visible that won't wear away. So I don't like to use pencils, but I know other people do. So cutting tools, and like that could be, as Catherine says in the blogs, if you got a chance to read our blogs in the message in the blog list, there was a bunch of links for further tutorials. So Catherine, one of the store owners, wrote all that, and she is team scissors. Most of the rest of us at the shop, because we like things to go quick, we are team rotary cutter. So it's a personal preference, whichever you prefer using. Team scissors can tend to be a little bit more precise, but yeah, there's no wrong option. Just to note, if you're using a rotary cutter, you will also need a cutting mat. And generally speaking, if you're using a rotary cutter, you'll need pattern weights. If you're using scissors, you'll need pins. I'm a mishmash. I like to use a rotary cutter, but also use my pins, of which I have here. So that, because generally speaking, I don't sew right away. I cut, and then after a couple of days or maybe weeks or maybe a year, then I get to sewing. So this way, everything stays in its place at the right spot. So that's it for the cutting tools. And I covered pins, but another thing that is useful for this project, especially once you actually start sewing, is wonder clips. It just went straight back in there. So these are wonder clips. They're sort of like binder clips. They're very useful. And a little tip, they have 1/4 inch, it's very hard to see, but they have 1/4 inch increments just over here in their backside. I never use them, but they're there for anyone who would like to use them. And those are very useful, especially when you're going to do the collar. And I find them way better to use than pins whenever I'm hemming. So you'll be hemming the sleeves and the waistband. Another thing so let me back up a little bit. This project was my first project in a very, very long time that I actually did all the steps minus the wrong side of the fabric. Everything correct. I didn't have to use my seam ripper once. It was like a hallelujah. This has never happened. It probably will never happen again. And part of the reason why it actually looks so good, because I didn't make mistakes, but also because I pressed like my life depended on it. I really wanted to make the store sample beautiful. And so for that reason, you're going to need an iron that you don't hate. In case you've never pressed before, I'm just going to explain. Pressing means when you're, let's pretend this is my fabric, you would hold your iron down and lift and move to the next spot. You don't iron it. The idea is to make that crease and to hold that in place. And Catherine, like I said, one of the store owners, her biggest advice is saying that the difference between homemade and more and less homemade looking clothes is pressing. And that's what I feel like that's how why my store sample turned out, for me, my best work in a very long time, because I just took the time to do that pressing. So definitely get an iron that you, if you don't have an iron that you don't hate, at least just be patient with yourself with your iron when you're doing this, just to know that because you don't have to buy our new iron, or if you can maybe borrow someone's iron. On that note, I have a hot hammer. We're out of stock of these in the shop, but they are on their way. I really liked using this when I was trying to measure all the hemming for the sleeves and for the waist. So you can see here, this is a ruler. It has all the markings here. And I'll show this later on, but you would have your fabric and you would fold it over to the desired measurement. And then you would use your iron to iron on top of this. This is felted, it's not going to melt, and it's very useful for other projects as well. On top of that, for ironing, now this is the hot hammer is a bonus item, and so is this one. But again, they can be used for most garment sewing projects, if not all, and it makes your life really easier. This is a tailor's ham. This is very great to use when you're pressing those seams, specifically the bias collar and the sleeves. And when you're pressing, this project calls for French seams. So when you're pressing all of those parts, this makes it easier, so that you're only pressing the part that you're ironing, so that the part that the back side of the fabric, like the back of the shirt, this is the front of the shirt, you would only be pressing and making a difference on the front side of the shirt, and you wouldn't be affecting the back side. And then you can also make sure that your curves are rounded for the sleeves and the collars and the waist. Those are all the notions for both of them, notions or supplies that I would recommend. And then for the version 2, which is the split front with the little button here, you're going to need a button. Now they say on the back of the pattern, you need a 20 millimeter button, but in the pattern, they say you need, I think it was a 0.8 millimeter button. Or sorry, just 8 millimeter. Oh yeah, sorry. So it's approximately 12 to 20 millimeters. That's what you would need as a button. You just need one button, so maybe you have something in your stash, or you can borrow one button off of someone, or go to Value Village and buy some buttons from there. So you just need the one. It's quite easy that way, and it'll look very nice. The other thing, in order to finish this area where the button will be, is you'll need a hand sewing needle. Anything that will work with, and your thread will be the same for both of them. For sewing it or hand sewing it, you can use the exact same thread, so you don't need to buy extra thread. On that note, I did forget to talk about matching thread. If you would like, when you're sewing the collars down with that hem, and then both of your hems here and your hem on your waist, if you would like that thread to be invisible, or as invisible as possible, you'll want matching thread that matches your fabric. Or alternatively, you can get a contrast thread in order to have that shine a little bit more. I'm of both worlds. Sometimes I want it hidden. Sometimes I like to have it shown a little bit. So it's whatever your preference. So that's it for the notions for both versions, notions and supplies. If anyone, I know I'm just sort of like talking a mile a minute, but if there's any other questions, just let me know. So now we're going to talk about the version 1 and 2 differences. It's quite simple. The difference is that version 1 is one piece in the bodice and one piece in the back, and then the 2 sleeves, whereas version 2 is the 2 pieces in the bodice, and the rest of the pieces are the same. And as a result, you have a split seam here and the button over here that you will do a button loop on. With that in mind, I've seen on both the Sew House 7 and on Instagram, people can wear it front to back. So once you have that in place, you can choose to have the button on the back side or in the front, whatever is your preference at that point. And ultimately, they're both very lovely. Now, there's also in the Sew House 7 patterns, what's really nice is you get, for this version, I don't think any of their other patterns, but I can't recall, is you get the standard and the curvy size fit. So if you are like myself in that I can fit in both sizes, you'll want to know what the differences are, because for me, I don't have a big enough bust to fit into their curvy sizes. Their curvy sizes are to fit if you're fuller than a double D. So myself, I'm a B cup, so I fit into their standard sizes instead. And that goes from 0 to 20. If you fit into their curvy sizes, but you didn't have that, you are not fuller than a double D, you would have to do a bust adjustment. And I would recommend checking Cashmerette's patterns. They have a full bust adjustments for anyone who could be in the reverse, who could be in the standard sizes, but is a fuller than a double D, but doesn't fit into that curvy range. So you could do a full bust adjustment. And Cashmerette is sort of like the queen of fitting, especially fitting for a bust. So she has that size on her blog, and also a small bust adjustment, so that you can choose either or depending on your needs. So those are the main differences from the 2 patterns, and it will be slightly wider on the waist as well. She does go into very briefly those 2 differences, but also if you open up the pattern, and then you can see the different shapes in the pattern sizes, so that you could also figure it out that way. Ooh, another bonus, as I mentioned this a little bit earlier with regarding to wrong side fabric, is the full sleeve expansion, or it looks like a full sleeve. I think it ends about over here somewhere, and it's free, which is quite lovely, because normally when pattern companies come out with expansions, there is a small cost to it. It's free. It's only available by PDF, so you can only purchase it off of Sew House 7's website. Not purchase it, you can only add it to your cart on Sew House 7's website. And then at that point, you can print it off. You can get that at a printer, like your own printer, or you can go to a printer. We always recommend Gilmore Printing. They're very close to the shop, and it won't cost you more than $5 for one sheet, because their minimum is $5. So, and they're quite quick. They do quite a big, they're quite quick in terms of turnaround time, usually 1 to 2 days. And they print on large format paper. If you do it at home, you would have to cut with the regular size printer paper. I haven't made the gathered expansion, and for this video series, we won't be doing the gathered sleeve expansion, but you're welcome to join along. It's going to be very similar in terms of at least construction. The difference will be in hemming. So you'll just have to follow along with the instructions in that scenario. Oh, and just to mention, because I don't think I've mentioned it, in the store sample that is at the shop that you're welcome to go observe or try on would be, it's a size 14 to 16, and it is the regular front with the 3/4 length sleeves. The reason why they look so long in the video, in the thumbnail on this video, but also at the shop, is because I didn't do the cuff. And the one that we will be doing in this video is the split front with the button loop, so that everyone can follow along, because that's a little bit more tricky. Now, next we're going to talk about how to measure your body. So I'm not going to get into too many details right now, because if you want to get the details, we do have that in the blogs that are linked below in this video. But ultimately, for this pattern, you need to measure your bust, which is the fullest part of your chest area, and then you'll need to measure your waist and your hips. Now, this pattern is quite loose. It's supposed to be quite loose. So what I did on mine is I measured myself, and I'm a size 14 on my bust, and then I'm a size 16 on my waist and hips. And I made it, sorry, I just had there's an alarm going off. Hey Google, please turn off the alarm. Apologies if that set off your Google. So what, I lost my track. I'm sorry. Oh yes. So what I did is I measured myself 14, 16, 16, and I graded my pattern, which is something we're going to talk about next. I found that it was actually too loose at my hips because the pattern is meant to be loose at your hips. So this is where I would fall back to make a wearable muslin if you're unsure about fit or if you're in between sizes, because the way that the pattern is made would make it potentially different. Another way you could get around this is after taking your measurements and finding where you fit. And just to show you, all the sizes are on the back of the paper pattern if you have it, or if you have a PDF, there would be a sheet of where to explain where all the sizes are. I just need, I'm going to use this. So let's say, I know this is all going to be backwards, but let's just say you were on this size range for your bust, but you were in that size range for your hips and that size range for your waist, then you just want to keep note of that. So that's what I mean by your size range. And what you'll do is you'll just grab your measuring tape if you have one. If not, that would be something you would need to add to your Notion of supplies. And then just measure yourself wherever is your fullest point. So generally speaking, that's where your nipples are. And so you just measure yourself there. And you, ideally you want to be wearing nothing too bulky. So not a jacket, not a big sweater, just an average amount of clothes. And that's how you would measure yourself. If you need help, grab a second set of hands. And yeah, we have measuring tools at the shop too if you need those. And so your bust is your biggest part, your waist is your smallest part, and your hips are your largest part. And there's also a diagram in the blogs that can show you all the different measurements that could ever be asked of in a sewing pattern. But in this particular sewing pattern, you just need those three. So for sizing and grading, again, I won't go too much into details, but to just cover the broad spectrum. And if you would like more details and more sort of nitty gritty, definitely go check out the blog that Catherine wrote. But the idea is that, as I mentioned, myself, I am different sizes in different parts of my body, which is quite normal. I guess nothing's normal, so no, it doesn't matter. But the idea is that you would take those different measurements, compare it. In this scenario, especially since for me, I found it was too loose where I graded. So what I should have done is check where the finished measurements are, use my measuring tape to determine what that would feel like, and wrap that around my body. So let me try and do, I'm just going to look right now. So what I should have been, finished garment sizes, bottom opening 54 inches. Oh, I was like basically there. So that from my size is the bottom of the shirt. So I would wrap that around me. And determine if that was loose enough for me. So this is where it was slightly bigger than I wanted. So I should have gone the size down, which is what I am on my bust, which is 52 inches. So just 2 inches shorter. And that makes a difference. So that's what I'll be doing in the version that I sew for this sew along, is I will be doing a size 14 all the way down, and we'll see how my experiment works out. So what I'm going to draw. That's what I meant to do here. And my pen ran away. There it is. Okay. So if this is my bust measurement, maybe I can show you on here. Apologies. Normally when I have to draw this, I'm drawing this right side. So over here you can, I don't know if you can see, but I wrote size 14 over here and then size 16. So what I did is at the part where I decided I was going to go, that was size 14 and this was size 16. You want to do a gradual line. Forgive my drawing. It's not going to look gradual here to there, because what it would have been, again, terrible drawings, but if this had been the line for size 14, so far size 16, and this is the line for size 14, I would want to make sure I gradually go bigger. Let me find the actual pattern here. Apologies. If I'm not explaining myself right, perhaps this will assist. Okay, so you see, ooh, I'm just getting a pop-up. So there are all these lines. And this is why I say Catherine's blog is better, because she has photos and it's easier to do than a video. But if there's these two lines, the outside line would be the biggest line. So if I'm going from a smaller to an outer one, I want to make as gradual of a line in between the two from the key points of measurement. So if this was the bust and this is the hips, between that line and this line, I would want to make it a gradual line. And that also depends on the body. So if you find that instead of gradual for your body, it's actually quite sharp, then that's how you would adjust it as well. So definitely check out that blog, but that's what grading is. It's adjusting the pattern and the clothes ultimately to fit your size based on your measurements, which is why sewing your own clothes is quite fun. Okay, so that's the sizing and the grading. Now we're going to talk about how to trace a pattern. This is a key thing that I did forget to mention in your notions, but this is a personal preference, which is why I didn't mention it. Some people like to take the tissue and cut straight into their tissue. I don't like to do that, because if I made a mistake when I cut into, such as me not grading to the correct size, or if you need to make any adjustments for the future, if you were to gain or lose weight, or if you were ever to try and make something for someone else. So let's say you want to make it for a friend or for a family member, if they are so lucky, then you would want to keep your original as is in condition and use pattern trace instead. So that's what this is here. We have the Swedish tracing paper. It's neither Swedish nor a real paper, because you can iron it, you can pin it, you can sew it, and it doesn't tear as easily as paper. But that's what it's called. So you can purchase this at the shop. Alternatively, I know some other people, they might use something else, like they could use their own tissue paper or the like. But the nice thing about this is because it is quite wide and there's 10 meters of it on the roll. And I think it's $27.99, and you'll use it for quite a few projects. I've had mine for quite some time. And so that's what I would use myself personally. But if you are the type of person to just go straight in, your body has been the exact same for, however many years, and you know that you're likely not to change, then you do however you want. So the next step of that is laying out your tracing paper on top of your pattern and tracing it. So I like to use a pen, because I have found that in the past I used pencils and it faded. So I ended up not being able to fully see what I was doing. Another tip is I like to use a ballpoint pen, because a regular pen can rip through the paper, especially if you're tracing hard. And then the rest of the key details would be writing the pattern piece number. So in this case, it's number 2. And all these details will be on the piece itself. So you would want to copy and paste not copy and paste. Oh my gosh, I've been on a computer too long today. You would want to trace out all the key details here. And that it also includes all notches. So any notch for the arms, for the bodice, and then the grain line. And then also is a fold line. So if it's to be cut on the fold, or if it's to be cut straight down. And then you would also put anything that's on the paper. I like to put all the information. I know some people are they're more comfortable and they just write a little bit. I'm the type of person, I just like to know all of it. And then I like to put in personal details. So I won't necessarily put this on all the pieces, but I'll put it on maybe one piece of that set. And I will write the date that I'm tracing it, my measurements that I'm tracing it at. So this way, again, if you're like myself and your body changes in 5 years and you want to make it again, well, then you know what is on here. And then another thing too is if you've made any changes to the pattern. So you can lengthen and shorten patterns. So right here, you can see I have a fine line. This is the lengthen and shortening line. And Catherine also does talk about that in the blogs that I've linked. But essentially, you would either cut here and lift it up on both sides. This is very Cole's notes, so please review the blog. But you would cut here and lift it up, either an inch or 2 inches if you wanted to shorten it, or you would do the reverse. You would cut here and put in an extra piece if you wanted to add length or not. I am 5'7", and I normally like to lengthen patterns, even though I'm not too far off the average height of patterns, because I just don't want, lifting my arms and then having belly shown. That's not comfortable for me. I forgot to lengthen the pattern for this one. So if you are also sort of on that cusp, and you forget to lengthen yours, I would suggest just doing a slightly smaller hem when it comes time to doing that, because that's what I did. And yeah, those are all the key things I would write in it. If you guys have key things that you would like to add in there, it's also a good thing to know. Maybe any notes that when you cut this out, you could put that in there. So, and as I mentioned before with team scissors or team rotary cutter, if you're using a rotary cutter, you can use pins or paper weights, pattern weights. I guess a paper weight would work too, to hold your, you would put it in the middle of the piece and cut around it so that it just doesn't shift or move. Or if you're like myself, I like to pin it if I'm not going to sew it right away, and then use my rotary cutter on my cutting mat. And if you're doing the scissors, it's definitely advisable to pin so that when you're lifting the fabric as you're cutting around, it doesn't lift the piece up. So this way you lift everything at the right angle. Those are all the key tips for how to trace a pattern. I know I'm at about half an hour, so I'm not going to talk too much longer. I'm almost done. And then in terms of cutting out a pattern, there's a couple of things. So I know I sort of briefly talked about it, but I'm going to go into more depth. So on the booklet or PDF, if you purchase a PDF, there's cutting templates based on the different versions that you may or may not be sewing. And in addition to this, I always like to try and get maximum amount of fabric usage. So I'm just going to draw something very basic. Please, again, do not judge my drawing skills. There's two ways you're generally going to be told how to fold fabric. So if this is your fabric, that's your pattern. That would open up in that direction, and then you would cut the other side of this because it needed to be cut on a fold. So that is a way you can do it. Generally speaking, though, as you can see over here, it can waste quite a bit of fabric. So what I like to do instead, whenever I have to cut on the fold, is I like to cut my fabric like this. Because keep in mind, these are not obviously to scale, but then if I fold, I get 2 fold spaces out of this. So then everything I would be able to cut over here, and it generally uses way less fabric. generally results in way less fabric waste cutting this way, but it all depends on your fabric, the size of your fabric, the size of your pieces. So I would play around with it before cutting into it just to see if you can get a little bit extra. And in terms of what you may do with that extra, I mean, maybe you can make another Remy out of a piece of it and color block it. It's better than it going to the landfill, in my opinion, just trying to save some fabric and then save some money for yourself if it's this way you get a little bit extra. So those are generally the two ways you'll be told. Or alternatively, if it's just cutting something on a single fold, on no fold, you would just cut it flat like this. As an example, the sleeves are cut in this direction, but the bodice pieces are cut like that. I guess except for the split seam. The split seam would be cut also single. So that's everything about cutting a pattern, and we're done. That's week 1, everyone. One more piece. I'll just say this. It'll be hard to tell here, but there's piece 6 right there. It's your bias. When you're cutting that one out, you want to make sure. So cutting on a bias means, and the pattern will show this because you have all these marking spots. So this one right here, what usually when it goes straight down, it will always say what it's for, and it might go in this direction, but this one says it's a grain line. So what you want to do is make sure that the grain of your fabric is going in that direction. For the bias piece, it's not like that because you want to cut it on the bias, which means cutting your fabric on a 45-degree angle. So if you cut your piece, pretend this is your fabric nicely fold out. If you cut your piece lengthwise or widthwise, but with the grain, it won't stretch, and you need that stretch because it's not it's not a stretch fabric, it's a woven fabric. You need to cut it on the 45-degree angle because that's where the stretch is. If you take your fabric at home, and you just go like that, like that's me pulling it. There's no stretch there, and there's no stretch up. But if I go on the edge, on the 45-degree angle, there's stretch. It's not a lot, but there is stretch. And that's what you need in order to sew it on a curve. So instead of cutting it something not straight like that, you're going to want to cut it as the pattern shows you. It's unfortunately going to waste fabric, but you're going to want to cut it on a 45-degree angle. If you have a ruler, like one of those 6 inches by 24 inches rulers, they have an angle degree on there too that you can help to figure out yourself. But ultimately, if you can pinch your fabric and stretch it in one direction, then you know that that's the 45-degree angle and you're good on that end. So that was the only other cutting tip I had regarding this pattern. Everything else is cut as normal, and that's it. Label all your pieces so they don't get lost. I like to, as you might have seen, I like to have a little paper clip. So I put all my pieces together so that they don't get lost. And then once you're done cutting them, of course, once you're done cutting your fabric, I like to put them in a little either clear envelope and write on the outside of the envelope on a little sticky tag what's inside, so I don't have to go hunting for it. Does it always work? No. But do I try my best? Yes. And a fun thing that you can do for this pattern is if you have any labels. So I used one I have it here? This one's always a fun one. This one says just made in the nick of time or just finished in time. And there's some sweary ones in here. Whatever labels you might have, this is a great one to use for that because it's actually really easy to sew on. And that's it. If you guys have any questions, just let us know. I hope you guys are going to enjoy this sew along. I enjoyed making it, so I'm going to enjoy making my second one. Let me show you the fabrics I'm thinking of. I haven't fully decided, but this one's a double gauze. I know it's not choosing for this, so I'm going to figure something out if I'm going to do a hack for this. And this one is a silk. You can tell I like these colors. This one is a silk blend that I got actually from Fabrications, but it was one of our vintage ones. A fabric designer had a bunch of fabric that we sold, and I really like the silk. So I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see if I have enough fabric for it, lay out my pieces. That's a nice thing too. If you're not sure about how much fabric you're going to take, trace out your pattern and then lay it on all your fabric and see if you can make it fit. Because sometimes the pattern may say that you need X amount of fabric, but you might be able to get away with like half a meter less because of how you fit things. And that's where I'm just pulling out my papers. Cutting like this and cutting like this can make a difference in saving you some fabric and saving you some money. So I'd love to see your photos. If you guys have them, you can email them to the shop. And if you guys have any questions, yeah, just put them below or email us at the shop. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. And hopefully it's not snowing too much in Ottawa or snowing too much wherever you are and everyone gets safely around tomorrow. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.